Do you know that I never wanted to be a quilter? Mostly because I was so intimidated by it. I thought I'm never going to worry about my points all being perfect and getting all my seams and my lines to match up. And then I realized that they don't have to. And it's also not as hard as it looks. Like when I look at something like this, right away I look at all the pieces and how do they get them to match up, all the little points and the little teeny tiny triangles, like those are so small. That looks like it would be so hard to sew. And the truth is, there are so many tricks that quilters know that make something like this, which looks complicated, actually so easy. I'm going to take you through step by step and show you how to make this cute little patchwork strawberry. And then that's part one. And then part two, I'm going to show you what to do with this cute little patchwork strawberry. We're going to actually make this into something. But the first part of the process is learning how to put these little tiny squares together and get the seams to all match up. We're going to get started and I'm going to show you exactly how I did this. The first thing you need is some sort of grid. And yes, you can get pre-printed gridded interfacing, which is fantastic. But I don't have any of what I need for the size I'm doing on hand, so I'm going to make my own. I want my squares for this project to be 1.5 inches apart. So I'm just taking a ruler, making sure to line everything up nice and straight, and I'm just using a marker or something that I will be able to see through my interfacing. And I'm just marking every 1.5 inches across this piece of paper. Now, the piece of paper I'm using is a standard size 8.5 by 11. It's a little bit smaller than the strawberry patch is going to be, but it's big enough to make a grid on my interfacing for what I'm doing for this project. I am using a lightweight interfacing for this project. It is P44F. It's a Pellon fusible. Now, you need to know which side is fusible. That's the bumpy side. So you're going to lay your interfacing over your grid that you just drew on paper, and you want the bumpy side facing up. Then we're going to take our little patchwork squares and we're going to lay them out in whatever arrangement you want to make. Now, this strawberry pattern is a pattern I'm in the process of working on right now, so it's not available yet, but stay tuned. A pattern for this is coming along with the completed project. So there will be a pattern to come, but you can do this with any shape. You could do this just for patchwork, even to practice this technique. But I promise you, a pattern is coming. Okay, so take your squares, whether you're doing patchwork or if you're laying out a strawberry or whatever it might be, and you just simply take your squares and you just start laying them out in whatever order you want them to be. For the strawberry, it's a little bit more particular because, well, we're making an actual shape. If you were doing patchwork, just start laying out your squares in whatever order you want them to be on your grid. And the great thing about this technique is you can see what it's all going to look like before you actually sew it together. And so if there are squares, if you have one right next to each other that are the same color or a similar print, you can easily pick them up and move them around before we get to the next step. Okay, so move those blocks around until you're happy with the layout. And once you're happy with how everything looks, make sure that your squares are all nice and straight and in straight, even rows. And then we're going to press everything into place. Remember, we laid our interfacing bumpy side up. That's the fusible side. So take your iron and I want you to press, not iron. The difference is pressing. You're literally just pressing it down, holding it in place for a minute, a few seconds, whatever it might be, and then you move it from place to place. You don't want to iron back and forth at this point, not until they're adhered to the fusible. Then you can do a little bit more ironing like I'm doing here just to make sure everything is secure. And once you're done ironing, just slide that piece of paper out from underneath and set it aside for your next project when you need a grid. Now this is where the magic happens. You're going to take this over to your sewing machine. And instead of trying to sew all these little tiny 1.5 inch squares together, you're simply going to fold over your rows and you're going to sew using 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. So fold it over just like that. And because you laid them in nice, straight, even rows, it folds over beautifully. So now just put it under your presser foot and stitch. I'm using 1/4 inch presser foot here on my Juki, and that way I can keep the presser foot aligned with the edge of my fabric. We are going to repeat this process all the way across, going the same direction. So go ahead and just open that up and then fold it over again. You're just going to keep folding it over. You just want to make sure you don't catch the previous row in your fold. So just fold it over and stitch and keep doing this until you get all the way across to the other side. This is the last row. We're going to open it up, take a look, make sure everything is captured in those seams, and it should be just fine. Now we have to do a little bit of snipping. So grab a pair of scissors, make sure that point is nice and sharp, and you're going to snip in the intersections just up to the stitching line. Don't snip into the stitching, just before it. So you're going to snip each of the intersections where your fabric meets together, and you're going to do this for every row that you just sewed. This way, when we go to press it with our iron, everything is going to lay down and it's going to eliminate that added bulk in each of the intersections, because next we're going to sew it the other direction and you want these seams to lay down nice and flat. So just take your time. Don't snip into the stitching, but just snip the opening just a little tiny bit. I'll show you what that looks like when I get to the end here, and then we're going to take it over to the iron. We're going to get it all pressed and ready to sew the other way. Okay, now that I'm done snipping, I'm going to open this up and I'm going to fold it just to show you how those seams like to lay down now that we snipped it open. Go ahead and place this on your ironing surface, and you can use steam for this if you want. You know, adding that interfacing adds a little bit of thickness here. So you want to make sure to get those seams to lay down nice and evenly and make sure they're all going the same direction. I like to press from the bottom up to make sure all those seams are laying down nice and flat, going the same way. So get them pressed. I also flip it over just to make sure there's no weird wrinkles or bobbles or anything in there. So, and I press it back towards myself because I'm pressing the same way I wanted those seams to go. So give it a good press. Use some steam, and you'll be able to see how nice and flat they lay. So when we fold this the other direction before we get ready to sew, you can see how those intersections lay down so nice and flat. And then you want to stitch with the seams facing down so that your presser foot doesn't get caught up on those seams. So now we're going to fold and sew the same way we did until we go all the way across the other direction. So just repeat this process for each row, making sure you don't catch the previous row in the next one when you fold it over. You just want to make sure to fold and lay everything open, and then just keep stitching using that same 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way across. Once you are done with all of your stitching, open that up, take it back over to the ironing board one last time and press those seams down, and your project will lay nice and flat. Look at how cute that is. Now, wasn't that much easier than what you ever imagined it could be? I always pictured people sewing those tiny little squares, like the finished size is 1 inch, and I couldn't imagine trying to piece and place all that perfectly so everything matched up. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Remember, this was just part 1. So be sure you hit that subscribe button and follow along so that you don't miss part 2. And I'm going to show you what to do with this next.